And now is my joy to welcome Amitava Kumar.
What an honor it is to be here, lovely, and super thrilled to be reading with Jill McCorkle. Thank you, Leah, for inviting me here, and everyone else for doing the hard work, including the bartenders in French House. I mean, I said to them yesterday, here are these PhD folks getting their PhD in creative writing, serving drinks. I said, you guys are the AOC of creative writing, mixing a new cocktail for democracy, etc. So, all right. I have timed my reading. Half of it, equal number of words, is from one novel called Immigrant, Montana, the first few pages, and the same number of words from a novel that is coming out in October, and that one is called A Time Outside This Time. So, Immigrant, Montana. I was a new immigrant eager to shine, and if self-abuse were to be omitted from the reckoning, pure of body and heart. The letters I sent my parents in India were full of enthusiasm for the marvels of my new life. To those who welcomed me to America, I wanted to say, without even being asked, that E.T. ought to have won the Oscar over Gandhi. I had found the latter insufficiently authentic, but more crucially, I felt insufficiently authentic myself. Not so much fake as insubstantial. I understood that I needed a suitable narrative to present to the people I was meeting. There was only contempt in my heart for my fellow Indian students who repeated stories about trying to educate ignorant Americans in barbershops who had asked how come they spoke such good English, or if they belonged to tribes or grew up among tigers. The nostalgia I had come to treasure was a hypertrophied sense of the past as a place with street signs and a figure atop a staircase that I recognized. This desire had nothing to do with the kinds of claims to civilizational superiority that make men demolish places of worship or want to bomb cities into oblivion. I knew this, and yet I was uncertain about my story. I lacked calm self-knowledge. If a woman spoke to me, particularly if she was attractive, I grew excited and talked too much. I'm talking of what happened more than 2 decades ago, my first years here and my first loves. But the reality of my becoming who I am now, this evolution, as it were, goes back in time to the monkeys that surrounded me as an infant. This is my own personal origin of species. The red-bottomed monkeys of my childhood would leave the branches of the big tamarind tree and peel the oranges left unattended on the balcony of Lotan Mamaji's house. This was in Ara in eastern India in the late 60s. A war with Pakistan was over and another loomed in the future. Prime Minister Nehru had been dead only a few years. In the language of the history books, the nation was in turmoil. Lotan Mamaji was my mother's younger brother, a giant of a man, immense and bearded, pan tucked under one dark cheek like a secret that he didn't want to share. One winter morning, while everyone on the balcony sat listening to the radio, following the cricket commentary from Eden Gardens, a monkey stole into Mamaji's room. He climbed on the huge white bed and, finding Mamaji's pistol, brandished it, they say, at my cousin who was born 2 months after me and still in her crib. No one moved. Then, turning the pistol around, the primate mind prompting the opposable thumb to grasp the trigger, the monkey blew his brains out. He was a medium-sized young male. Bits of flesh, bone, hair, and gray matter had to be cleaned from the pictures of the long-dead family patriarchs hanging on the wall. There were so many lies repeated in the family, so many half-secrets. I don't know why I never asked anyone if the monkey story was true. For a long time, it had been lodged in my mind as a baptismal tale that taught me the nature of fear, or maybe provided a lesson about fate. But then the past lost its authority and the meaning of the story changed. I had by then come out of my teen years. The main questions now were about the fiction of the past, the idea I had of myself as a person, and what it meant for me to become a writer. For many years, the idea of writing has meant recognizing and even addressing a division in my life, the gap between India, the land of my birth, and the United States, where I arrived as a young adult. If and when I imagine an audience for my writing, it is also a divided one, but the two places are connected, not only by those histories that cultural organizations celebrate through endlessly dull annual gatherings, but by millions of individual yearnings, all those stories of consummated or thwarted desire. Consider the monkeys in Ara, the rhesus macaques. They were not just visitors to my maternal uncle's home. They have a place in my imagination because they too were unheralded immigrants in America. A few years ago, I read in a newspaper report that the problem Delhi residents were having with monkeys went back to the early years of Indian independence, when thousands from that region were sent to America for scientific purposes. As many as 20 to 50,000 monkeys were exported each year. A newly independent India was in need of foreign exchange. The Americans needed middle-aged male monkeys for their experiments. The result of the selective trapping, according to a primatologist interviewed for the report, was the disruption of the ecological balance. The disruption took place because the family unit was broken, and the monkey groups entered a process of division that the primatologist called chaotic fission. But let's take a step back from the political and enter the riskier domain of the personal. I want to focus on why the monkeys came to mind when I started work on this book. I claim kinship with the monkeys of my childhood because of what I read in a magazine in 2010. Rhesus macaques, who normally are not self-aware, I'm quoting, will, following brain surgery, examine their genitals in a mirror. Similar evidence of self-awareness was previously limited to higher primates, dolphins, magpies, and an elephant named Happy, unquote. I love this in Harper's Magazine. I mean, that's worth a subscription just for these things. In America, land of the free and home of the brave, it was possible, figuratively speaking, to discuss genitalia in public. There's a footnote here, by the way. So the footnote says, Bill Clinton on President Obama's re-election. He's luckier than a dog with two dicks. Of course, Clinton deserves a footnote in any book on love. My writing notebook also has this quote in it. I'm quoting Clinton. But love can mean different things too, Mr. Bittman. There are a lot of women with whom I have never had any inappropriate conduct who are friends of mine who will say from time to time, I love you. And I know that they don't mean anything wrong by that, unquote. Bill Clinton, testimony before grand jury. This conference is special in the way that it has done away with those dull introductions to writers when they do the readings. I think it's an excellent idea. The other thing it also good about it is that there's no question answer session, but I was reminded of that because of this mention of genitalia. I was doing a reading. Katie has been with me in Jaipur, for example, and I was with Hanif Qureshi on the stage, and someone said, questions, and the first question was, Mr. Qureshi, have you been circumcised? I was certainly dumbstruck, but he was all right. He let the audience, sighs or surprise fade, and then he said, it's been a long time since anyone took any interest in my genitalia. Anyway, in America, land of the free and home of the brave, it was possible, figuratively speaking, to discuss genitalia in public. I discovered this when I turned on the radio one Tuesday night in my university apartment in Morningside Heights and heard a woman's voice, a foreign accent, except the surprise was that she was talking about sex. She sounded like Henry Kissinger. Her name was Dr. Ruth. Unlike Kissinger, she wanted us to make love, not war. In India, the only public mentions of sex were the advertisements painted on the walls that ran beside the railway tracks. I read the ads when I traveled from Patna to Delhi for college and was filled with anxiety about what awaited me when at last I would experience sex. On the brick walls near the tracks, large white letters in Hindi urged you to call a phone number if you suffered from premature ejaculation or erectile dysfunction or nightly emissions. A nation of silent sufferers, men with worried brows holding their heads in their offices during the day and back at home lying miserably awake beside quiet and disappointed wives in the dark. But not in America, where Dr. Ruth was talking to you cheerfully on the airwaves. I had no accurate idea of what epiglottis and guttural really meant, but those words vibrated in my mind when I listened to Dr. Ruth, her voice on the small black radio in the privacy of my room, offering advice to the males among her audience. Even if they themselves had already climaxed, they could help their female partners achieve orgasm. You can just pleasure her. I hadn't heard that word used as a verb before. I also spoke in an accented English. I wondered if Dr. Ruth's usage was correct. And for women out there, a man wants an orgasm, big deal. Give him an orgasm, it takes 2 minutes. Such relief for more than one reason. Thank you. And now a few pages for timeouts at this time. I've tried to, the only thing that binds the two, apart from the fact that they are the opening pages of 2 books, is the voice is an attempt to sound non-fictional and memoirish and make it like creepily mine, but what can I say? It isn't. In a little bit, it will be cocktail hour. Our beautiful villa stands on a hill, the sloping ground covered with small olive trees and long lines of tall, angular cypresses. A mansion in the distance is said to be where George and Amal Clooney spend their summers. I'm on the island for a cushy fellowship, working on a novel. In the week I have been here, this is what I have discovered. One sure way to stop visiting fellows and their spouses from talking to me is to answer them truthfully when they ask what it is I'm doing here. I give my answer and see the light die in their eyes. They nod and look elsewhere. The lake, for instance, which looks lovely at all hours, its color changing constantly. I don't blame anyone. Would you want to talk to someone who says they are studying models of social acceptance? I'm not lying when I say this. I'm just trying to avoid the seductive language of fiction. What I mean in this utterance is simply that I'm thinking about who in our communities will accept lies and deception. As in all matters, all my projects seeded in guilt, I find myself culpable. But on this issue, I have certain others in my sights. If anyone presses, I tell them that my novel is based on an untrue story. In fact, it is based on the many untrue stories that surround us and threaten to destroy us. Often, our world comes to us as bad fiction. Toni Morrison read the New York Times every day with pen in hand, making corrections she felt necessary, deleting words or inserting them as she went along. I thought I could start with that idea, a novel about reading the news. But the pencil marks would be found everywhere, not only on the newspaper. Scientific experiments, for instance, or a writer's memoir about writing, and why not our relationships and the way we live, our everyday life. I'm writing a report from the world of #fake news. This evening, while holding my glass of chilled, locally sourced wine, I'd like to be able to tell my interlocutor that the question I'm really asking is this: who among your neighbors will look the other way when a figure of authority comes to your door and puts a boot in your face? I wonder what their eyes might do then. I use what is called real life to craft my fiction. How is it different from fake news? Novelists with a great gift of imagination have invented situations, often quite simple and uncomplicated ones, that you can never rid from your mind. A family undertaking a long, tortuous journey with the corpse of a family member in a coffin to a dead woman's hometown. William Faulkner says a lay dying. 2 men on a train, each one wanting to kill someone, propose that they exchange murders and thereby have an alibi. Patricia Highsmith's Strangers on a Train. A woman is on her way to buy flowers for a party that she will host that night. Virginia Woolf's Mrs. Dalloway. A young man arriving in a city to collect his father's ashes and going on a drug rampage that sends him into a nightmarish spiral. Edward St. Aubyn, Bad News. I, however, am unable to invent fictional situations, or maybe they don't interest me that much. Real life, even ordinary life, is what fascinates me, the low road of journalistic observation. During his last week in office, in January 2017, President Obama gave an interview to a book critic from the New York Times. Obama told the interviewer, that his daughter Malia had read Ernest Hemingway's A Movable Feast and was captivated by the writer describing his goal of writing one true thing every day. Quote, all you have to do is write one true sentence, write the truest sentence that you know, unquote. When I read the interview, Trump had been president for 2 days. And I think the idea for this book was born there. I began keeping a daily journal, but instead of writing the truest sentence, I noted down a revealing lie. The US president was lying every day, but falsehoods I noted could be from anywhere in the world. Here's one from my country of birth, India. In the days prior to his retirement from the Rajasthan High Court, Justice Mahesh Chandra Sharma said that the cow should be declared the national animal of India because hundreds of millions of gods and goddesses lived in that sacred animal. The cow is the only creature, the judge opined, that takes in oxygen and also emits oxygen. He also extolled the virtues of cow urine. A book made up entirely of rumors, a compilation of false, fatal falsehoods. That's what I thought of as my raw material. It goes on like that, but let me cease because I want to introduce to you the great Jill McCorkle. Another thing I want to say before we allow her to come here is her remarkable, wonderful son is an editorial assistant at Knopf and helps me every day. So I am so grateful that tonight I'll also buy her drinks and maybe a mug for the SWC. So please welcome Jill McCorkle.
Thank you, Amitava. That was absolutely wonderful, and having admired you from afar, it just quadrupled and more so. Thank you, that was wonderful. And a big thanks to Leah and Adam and Gwen and the whole staff. What you make happen here is magic, and it's just a real honor to be here. I'm reading from my latest novel, one of those novels that came out in 2020, Hieroglyphics. There are 4 point-of-view characters, and I thought for consistency, I'll just stick with one. I have an elderly husband and wife, a middle-aged mom on the edge of going nuts, and her son, who's struggling a little. But I'm going to read from the elderly wife. Her name is Lil, and I think all you need to know is that in her childhood, she grew up in the Boston area. They have now retired in North Carolina, where they have a child. And in her childhood, her mother one night went out without saying where she was going in 1942, and she went to the Coconut Grove nightclub the night of the fire and did not come home. We all are haunted by something we did or didn't do, and the passing years either add to the weight or diminish it. Mine have diminished, perhaps because I've spent time thinking about it all. It might sound silly, but I see these bits and pieces as my contribution to evolution, the unearthing and dusting of the prints and markers that led me here. Some seem to bulldoze right through life and up to their headstones, but I want to take my time. I want to find the right words. I imagine my recipient to be you two, or perhaps your children, and I hope this is so, rather than some stranger who comes in and hoists old boxes into a dumpster or rakes away the remainders of my life like the sad debris in the aftermath of a flood or fire. I'll never get over the sight of what we left behind at our home of over 50 years to move down here, a mountain of cast-off things, old towels and linens, papers and books and shoes and pots, side tables and lamps, hoses and hose, packets of seeds I meant to plant, and a rubber squeak toy that had been safely hidden away in the back of my closet by one of the dogs long dead. And so much more. things not needed, things long forgotten, cans of cream of whatever soup and V8 juice, why, and peas that had sat there forgotten for years, and things that never should have been there in the first place, like tuna helper, or those things in my closet, like that geometric print mini dress I bought in the 60s, hoping to look like Petula Clark or Judy Carn, a perky pixie kind of dress that I never had the nerve to wear, and instead looked at it there at the back of the closet for years, along with a wiglet and a long frosted fall and some jackets with shoulders resembling a football player or Victorian monarch. We divided it all into Goodwill, consignment, recycle, landfill. But there were also the things I couldn't let go of: letters, reminders, souvenirs. And I'm taking my time, relieved when I find something that might have gotten lost in that mountain of debris, like one of your drawings from first grade, or the stub from a movie I'd forgotten I even saw, or a note from my father. When the moving van pulled away that afternoon and we got in the car and turned southward, the space within seemed so empty, vacant, our suitcases and silver chest in the trunk, an overnight bag and thermos of coffee on the back seat, and I had that terrible feeling that I had forgotten something, because I was thinking of all the times the car was filled with you, your belongings, your music and voices, the dogs, while going to school or on vacation or just to the grocery store, where I bought all of those things that I then put on the shelf there in our dimly lit pantry on the red gingham contact paper I spent one snowy afternoon 40 years ago cutting and sticking in place, all those things that I put there and then forgot about. I like to imagine that I'll be your cornerstone, a reminder of what was. The old building crumbles away, and yet there I will be, me, my life, our life, like when you were assigned time capsules in school. Remember, you both were in elementary school and were asked what you would take to leave on the moon, and then your children did it again with the turning of the century and asked us to write a letter about what has changed in our lifetime. Your father wrote a lot. And he even made a timeline about all that had changed about cars and appliances, the telephone and the mail. Sometimes I feel like my life is all laid out before me, dots connecting, patterns shaped and designed, words naming and classifying me. We all have those moments when we're so aware of where we are. They're the moments when we feel graced and blessed, and there are likewise those when we say, "What am I doing here?" I've tried to imagine my mother on that last night of her life. Surely she asked, "What am I doing here?" I ask myself that same thing in that empty feeling car, your father silent behind the wheel as we got on I-95, and instead of heading north to Gloucester as we had a million times before, we went south and kept going the rest of the day, neither of us saying much, and yet both aware of the sad, questioning cloud hanging over us. And after a restless night at a Holiday Inn somewhere in Maryland, we rode much of the next day until we got here and met the movers, belongings we had had for years, looking so different in the warm, bright light. And you were here to greet us, Becca. You were our reason for coming, and we're happy to have this time near you and your family. But I still wake some days and think, what am I doing here? Even though we've been here for over a year now, I panic, and then I try to rationalize it all, to name the reasons and the benefits of living here. We have followed the migratory path of the snowbirds we once saw as traitors, the weaklings, your father and I called them as we stood armed with our snow shovels and salt. And yes, ice and cold are hard on brittle bones, and yes, help is needed when dealing with worn-out hearts and lungs and words that won't come. The love and attention of a child nearby cannot be underestimated. Please know we're grateful, Becca. And yet, there remain those parts of me that simply refuse to come along, and they pull my mind this way and that all day, especially when I'm in here, sorting through it all and trying to give all these notes and pieces some order. I try to collect and hold on to them, but it's like grasping the wind, and yet those are the parts, what I knew as a child, that seems the truest parts of me. Home. I hear that word, and I'm in my bed in Massachusetts. I went to bed as one girl and woke up another. I hear the word home, and it is 1942, that late dark before I woke to learn that my mother had not come home. Even after all these years, I hear that word, and that is where I'm transported. I guess I've always drifted back there, so often that I have memories tucked within memories, like carpool lines, moments of waiting when something pulled me backwards. I recall clearly waiting for you, Becca, during swim practice, those cold early mornings before school, the air smelling of chlorine. There were echoes and splashing and a kind of false warmth when outside it was winter, snow on the ground. And I remember being there, not just once, but many times, too hot in my coat, but not wanting to shed everything because the whistles were blowing and it was time for practice to end and the day's work to begin. But I closed my eyes, and there in the dozy haze with the sounds of water, I drifted from our suburban comfort into that second story of my childhood home there on School Street. Last I checked, it was still there. A simple wooden house, tan with dark brown trim, a steep center staircase, and a radiator by the door where we laid our gloves and scarves. I can close my eyes and know every square inch. I know the sound of my father's footsteps leaving for his job at Waltham Watch, and then his return in early evening, already dark in the winter months. His movements through life were as precise as the timepieces occupying his days, the close fine-tuning of parts, a focused ability that reassured me, but I suspect had the opposite effect on my mother. I remember her standing, hands on her hips and toe tapping. Tick-tock, tick-tock, she said, moving her hand like a pendulum, impatient to get out and go wherever it was we were going. I remember hearing them laugh in the room next to mine, leaving me to feel both comforted and left out. My mother's laugh is one I can still hear on a good day, and yet I can't even begin to describe it to you. I tried to imitate it once, alone in the car while I watched the rush of children swarm from your school, and my voice was thin and tinny, nothing like what I was hearing in my head. Still, I placed my memory of it there, one to handle as gently as a piece of recording tape. These days, there would be a real recording to keep, but not so for my mother. Her voice is only in the head of those of us who knew her, and now there's no one who shares this with me. I remember my bedspread, nubby chenille in a pale yellow with a big heavy blanket on top of that, the radiator ticking like the Tin Man's heart, like your father's artificial valve. For many years now, when I couldn't sleep, I've lain awake there beside him and listened. It's a sound like the radiator of my childhood, the window above it encased in ice, crystals visible in the glow from the light on the corner where there was a local grocery. I even know the owner's name, Mr. Rosen, his white apron always stained with blood as he leaned across the counter, his smile boyish and funny as he reported neighborhood gossip, who he saw doing what when, while he slipped penny candies into your open palm. Earth to Lil, your father would say, or one of you would call Mom, hello. And I woke to this life, both glad to be in it, but also sad to leave that long ago moment. I would wake, and there you were, Becca, chlorine on your skin and hair, body goose-fleshed and shivering as I wrapped a big towel around you. I remember the moment so clearly, and yet I can't tell you what might have been on my mind that day or what coat I wore during that period of time. It might have been the camel-colored one, or it could have been that red corduroy I wore for so long, the one that led your dad, those times he acted silly, rare times, to sing that old song, Hey There, Little Red Riding Hood. It's so clear to me, the laughter, your childhood voices, your father's young face and head full of dark hair, but I cannot recall how I felt when I woke that day, what I did after your swim practice, what dance classes I taught that day, or what ancient this or that your father was fixated on and lecturing about at the time. And what did he and I talk about then? The news, the weather, what needed to be fixed? If so, then I can assure you that so much of life never changes. What I do recall is that while back in my childhood room, I saw my mother's hairbrush. It was simple and plain, so unlike her, just brown boar bristles, and she tossed her head side to side as she brushed and fluffed, the auburn heft of her hair falling chin length, very fashionable. It was on my dresser, and I was surprised and delighted to see it there. It was there like a promise, because she brushed her hair before bed 100 times, as she had read somewhere was the thing to do. She would have needed to come back into my room to get it, and I would have heard the door creak on its hinges. I would have seen her there in the dim light of the hallway lamp we left on all night because our stairs were so steep and the landing so small. I could almost see her there, and that's what I remember, straining my eyes against the darkness to see her there, the brush on my dresser above which the mirror reflected light from the street below. It's mysterious how fluid time has become for me. I wake and pour a glass and have no idea what I'll find. When I was in high school, our yearbook had a page that said faces with lots of little thumb-sized pictures, and we all very carefully wrote the name of the person under each picture. I was included in one with 3 other girls, Doris Banks and Lois Starnes and Jean Burr. I still like to look at those girls, the wavy curls with great big bows pinned to the side, a style that seems to have returned, infinite recycling. Darling Lil, too sweet to be forgotten. That was written so many times in my yearbook, but I suspect it wasn't true at all, both the sweet part and the forgotten. I stayed in touch with many people over the years through Christmas cards, change in address, the occasional swapping of birth announcements, then wedding, retirement, and then the obituaries started rolling in and have continued. Stay sweet, cutie pie. My best friend in elementary school was Betty Conroy. She lived down the street, and I went to her house almost every afternoon after my mother died. Then at some point, it was like I just stopped going, and I don't remember why. Betty had a doll I loved, and she would let me hold her if I promised to be very careful, a bridal doll, all white lace and veil, and we roller skated, our keys on strings around our necks, the scritch-scratch sound of those old metal wheels on the sidewalks. Remember when I took you all to Wallex for birthday parties or just on a Saturday afternoon? I always thought about skating with Betty just a few blocks away, a different time, a different life, and yet it felt like the two overlapped, a double exposure of me in 2 places. What happened to your mother? Betty asked one of those days, and though her mother shushed her, she also stopped stirring to listen. We were there in the kitchen because she had promised to let us crack and break the eggs. I mean, did you see her? Betty said. I focused on the recipe her mother had on the counter, something from Woman's Day, a magazine my mother had also sometimes bought. Cheese souffle cost 63 cents, 6 large servings, the recipe said. Warned the family that the souffle must be served immediately. I nodded but gave nothing else. It felt like a betrayal. And I was still harboring the hope that it had all been a terrible mistake, that it wasn't my mother after all. Maybe that was the last day I spent at Betty's. I've tried so many times to remember what came next, but I can't. Just as I now sometimes look at the faces page and even seeing the names written there in my own youthful handwriting, I can't place them. Your father often says, of course you can't. We're as old as dirt. And we laugh. In fact, when we moved here, I got a chalkboard and wrote faces at the top and then listed the neighbors we met and described them. Lucy, next door, slight stoop to the shoulders, hair has a pink tinge. Her husband Raymond has big ears and wears his pants too high and was a dermatologist. They have a koi pond in their backyard and talk about it all the time. The Parkers down the block, originally from upstate New York, but if we have anything in common, who would know? Because they spend all their time golfing and visiting their kids, somewhere even farther south than where we are now. The Warrens, much younger than everyone else on the street and always offering to help, even when you had no idea you needed any. Faces has helped us to remember all of their names and something about them. I wrote of the Parkers, fans of black hair dye and facial procedures, and of Ron Todd, the divorce realtor who sold us this house in between various dental procedures he described in great detail. I wrote a man, a plan, a root canal. Remember all those palindromes you kids knew? I had made your father laugh, finally, something that has become harder and harder to do. He used to always make jokes about his heart, about kicking the bucket, circling the drain, but those jokes have dwindled with all he has going on, so any levity is good. I'm hoping to do some more palindromes, but in the meantime, he said I need to keep faces hidden in the bedroom in case any of our neighbors pop in, something we're finding people do a lot around here. And I'm not complaining, Becca, because you and Ron Todd, of course, helped us find a great place to be. But I would be lying if I didn't say that there are times when the heat and humidity is killing us, as is the constant chatter and hospitality and all that hugging. Oh my, your father has done much better with that part than I have. He once lived here, after all, and has a greater tolerance for those who invade your personal space. I extend my hand and hope for the best. I avert my eyes if I sense a talker up ahead. Just the other day, a woman at the dry cleaner said to me, "The humility is just awful, ain't it, sugar?" And I said, oh my God, yes. The humility is terrible these days. And don't even mention the tea. Thick with sugar and God knows what, you can feel your arteries closing in resistance. In short, I'm homesick and I'm time sick. I would be lying not to say that. It's possible to feel content and resolved and still be homesick. I miss all that no longer is, which is why I paste and piece all these scraps together. Sometimes I hold a ticket or a photograph, a piece of paper, while willing myself back to where I first held it. I know that might sound silly, but it's what I do. I want to hear your young voices, the dog scratching to come in. I want to call my father on the telephone, fingering that rotary dial one number at a time, TW33642. Let me take this playbill and arrive at the theater, or this receipt and find myself there in the produce aisle of Star Market. Then after the show, or after I check out, after I sit and let the car warm up, I drive those familiar streets home and find everything just as I left it, the kitchen door creaking behind me. Thank you.